ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं कर्वावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। वासुदेवेन्द्रयोगिनं नत्वा ज्ञानप्रदं गुरुं मुमुक्षूणामितार्थाय तत्त्वबोधो विधीयते। नित्यं शुद्धं निराभासं निराकारं निरञ्जनं नित्यबोधं सानन्दं गुरुं ब्रह्म नमाम्यहम्। तत्त्वविवेककः आत्मा सत्यं तदन्यत् सर्वं मिथ्येति। आत्मा कः स्थूलसूक्ष्मकारणशरीराद् व्यतिरिक्तः पञ्चकोशातीतः सन् अवस्थात्रयसाक्षी सच्चिदानन्दस्वरूपः सन् यस्तिष्ठति स आत्मा स्थूलशरीरं किम् पञ्चीकृतपञ्चमहाभूतैः कृतं सत्कर्मजन्यं सुखदुःखादिभोगायतनं शरीरम् अस्ति। जायते वर्धते विपरिणमते अपक्षीयते विनश्यति इति षड्विकारवदेतत् स्थूलशरीरम्।
Excellent. Just one suggestion again. Nothing's wrong, but to improve it further, when we break the first line in chanting, we break it after kritam. That means panchikrit panchamahabhutaihi kritam, because that becomes a sentence then. Tat karma janyam again becomes a sentence. It's conveying sentence. So not that it was wrong, but now you will be conveying the whole sentence when you chant it as Panchikrit Panchamahabhutaihi Kritam Sat Karma Janyam.
Okay.
Right.
सूक्ष्मशरीरं किम् अपञ्चीकृतपञ्चमहाभूतैः कृतं तत्कर्मजन्यं सुखदुःखादिभोगसाधनं पञ्चज्ञानेन्द्रियाणि पञ्चकर्मेन्द्रियाणि पञ्चप्राणादयः मनश्चैकं बुद्धिश्चैका एवं सप्तदश कलाभिः सह यतिष्ठति तत् सूक्ष्मशरीरम्।
Excellent. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, continue this.
श्रोत्रं त्वक्चक्षुः रसनाघ्राणम् इति पञ्चज्ञानेन्द्रियाणि।
Very good. So we are seeing the Sukshma Shariram. Sukshma by word itself means that which is subtle, and subtle implies that it is invisible. It is not contactable directly. So author started by saying, to understand Atma, Tattva Viveka is necessary. Atma, why do you need to know? It is meant for a mumukshu who wants moksha. So he must have the knowledge of what brings mukti. What is mukti? So in that context, Vedanta tells us a very unique method with which it conveys to us what is the subtlest. Sukshma Sharir itself is subtle. Cannot be seen, cannot be heard, smelt, etc. That is what makes it Sukshma Shariram. Then Atma is subtlest. Beyond Sukshma Sharir also. Beyond as in it is transcending it. It is far, far subtler than even the subtle body. So how do you convey something which is not a subject or not a topic of any of your sense organs, and yet knowing it will give moksha, will bring moksha. मोक्ष का कारण है आत्मज्ञान. मोक्ष सिद्ध करता है, आत्मज्ञान सिद्ध करता है मोक्ष को. How is that going to be possible? Shastra has a very unique methodology of conveying the subtlest, because it cannot be grasped. What it does is, what can be grasped by the individual knowledge, it says, ये आत्मा नहीं है. So I'll give you an example here. If you can see all this, first, how many of you know hemp seeds? Okay, those who know, the question is not for you. You almost all of you know it. So, but you can see these. Sorry for the reflection. Okay, this is a combination of all seeds. Now I give you this glass full of multigrains, multi-seeds. And I ask you, and you're not supposed to know what are hemp seeds. I ask you to pick out hemp seeds for me. If you have never seen hemp seeds, then what will be your method of identifying hemp seeds?
We'll start with the ones we know.
You will start with the
Ones we know.
ones you know.
It goes out.
So all that you know, you will start removing it. As what?
What is not hemp seeds?
Exactly. That is now understood as methodology of Vedanta. What I can know and what I already know, ये वो चीज तो नहीं है. This also comes as knowledge when I know something. That is a characteristic of knowledge. It is a characteristic of knowledge that when I know something, then I automatically also know what it is not. So what Shastra does here is to convey the subtlest of the subtlest, Atma. Gives you first the knowledge of everything that falls in the realm of know, that you can know. And you actually know, but you have never identified it. So knowledge is only helping me identify it, locate it, and then it has already said, Sarvam Mithya iti, Atma Satyam Everything else is mithya. So everything else which is not Atma is mithya, and all of that gets one word. Not Atma is another word called Anatma. Anatma. An prefix before Atma word means not Atma. So Atma क्या है कहने के लिए, it has given us all the knowledge, actually what we can understand by our senses, what we can perceive, even infer, what is knowable. Whatever falls in the category of knowable is all mithya, and all of it is bracketed as anatma. ये आत्मा नहीं है. Very important point. ये आत्मा नहीं है. When he says atma kaha, he says vyatiriktah. Sthula sharira vyatiriktah. So what is sthula sharir then? Anatma. ये आत्मा नहीं है. So what is it? Mithya hai. So what is the category then? It is not Atma. So just to constantly say na Atma, Sanskrit has a word for whatever is na Atma as Anatma. So you just say it's Anatma. But Anatma, many people mistake it to be inert. So we don't want to classify Anatma as separate. You understand it as Mithya. Mithya means it has. Now you've understood Mithya very well. Mithya has a temporary existence, dependent existence, and whatever has a dependent existence is anatma. ये वो आत्मा नहीं है. So, purpose of Shastra is to identify, help us identify what falls in the realm of anatma. Means अनात्मा का लक्षण या अनात्मा धर्म is to be recognized. And dharam word here, I'm also indirectly answering a question. Dharam word here doesn't mean your duty. Dharam means nature. So if you say what is the purpose of Shastra's technique that it has employed is to identify the nature of anatma, uska dharam kya hai, and by removing it, what they call as neti. Not this, not this. It's very popular in Vedantic understanding that Vedanta takes the help of the Nyaya, which is based on neti. Not this, not this, not this. So when I have understood what is sthula sharira, as the author has said, I can now see it here. And I know what I can see has a dependent reality. It is mithya, therefore it is anatma. तो ये पूरा का पूरा धर्म अनात्मा का जो धर्म रिकॉग्नाइज हो गया एज मिथ्यत्वम, ये आत्मा से अलग है. नेचर ऑफ आत्मा, धर्म ऑफ आत्मा वुड मीन नेचर ऑफ आत्मा से अलग है. व्हाट इज द नेचर ऑफ आत्मा, धर्म ऑफ आत्मा? सच्चिदानंद स्वरूपः. ही इज गोइंग टू टेल अस नाउ. You clearly process the information as what is being explained in these parts. The focus is not to establish its reality. The focus is to establish its mithyatvam, to recognize its temporariness, temporary reality. So with this, what is popular as neti, one of the methods that Vedanta would adopt to convey this, आत्मा कहा स्थूल शरीर व्यतिरिक्तः. स्थूल शरीर anatma. Therefore, it is not atma. That means if I want to know my permanent peaceful state, my absolute existential state, my true nature, my reality, then my sharir is not my reality. This gross body is not my reality. This becomes the implication. Then Sukshma Sharira also Vyatirikta. So Sukshma Sharira also is, he's explained it, Panchikrit Panch Mahabhutaihi Satkarma Janyam Sukha Dukkhadi Bhoga Yatanam Shariram Asti Jayate Vardhate Viparinamate Apakshita etc. Shad Vikaravat Sthula Shariram. Therefore now I can see, this is Sthula Shariram. Apanchikrit Pancha Mahabhutaihi Kritam Satkarmajanyam Sukha Dukkhadi Bhoga Sadhanam. Pancha Jnana Indriyani Jnana Indriyas. Now we are on Jnana Indriyas. Now I can start recognizing that though I am not able to see my subtle body, but I know I have the knowledge of things. I have knowledge of perceptions. I have knowledge of feelings, emotions. I have knowledge of myself and others. I have a lot of knowledge. This also now already establishing itself as known. I can know it. What I can know, grasp by my own senses, by my own anuman, etc. This is, though it is sukshma, it is still mithya. It is dependent on something. And because it is mithya, it also goes into the category of anatma. Ye atma nahi hai. So the purpose seems to be twofold if we don't pay attention to the first part of it. Why is he taking us through this method is not to tell us this is reality, the world as you see is reality, but to tell us just the other. What? That this all is only temporary and not your true nature. Therefore, it is negatable. Neti. Ye atma nahi hai. So, sthula shariram, neti atma. Not atma. Sukshma shariram, not atma. And now in Sukshma Shariram, he gave us the constituents of it, because Sukshma Sharir to बहुत कुछ मतलब thoughts भी सूक्ष्म है, feelings सूक्ष्म है, etc. So since everything is sukshma, then all of it I can, but it's a generalization. I have found myself being bound to my thoughts at various levels. So he's now breaking them up further. And before I move on to that, there was another question that was asked, that because we said it is born from Satkarma Janyam, we also identify that there are some deaths that happen very early, which don't go through the entire Shadvikar. So what is the reason for it? Just two things in it. First is, you do find early death sometimes. In fact, I think I mentioned in the class also, statistically, there are more deaths that happen in the womb than actually births happen. Medical science has kind of established this as a fact that birth is a really rare phenomenon. We may say we are overpopulated, but factually birth is a rare phenomenon. So, within the womb itself, the vikar happened. If the death has happened in the womb, the vikar already went through in the womb. So most of the times the disease onset is early. Suppose even afterwards there can be an early death, childhood death, etc. Death of the body, remember. So the reason is because the disease has onset early, etc. And then there can be some deaths which are sudden deaths. Like I gave the example of the person who was playing cricket and then he just collapsed. He had a heart attack and he collapsed. Now he is a 45 plus. He had not gone through the extreme of apakshiyate. He was in the declining stage of still, because I may not recognize it, but the body has already undergone changes. The principle behind this is when you do the karma part of it, as long as the person here, the indweller, who is the indweller, you will get to know also. The one who claims the body as me, the one who says me, you are a jiva, you are an individual, you are a conscious being who is now identified with the body. How long are you going to remain connected with the body is dependent upon one of the factors is your prarabdha karma. When karmas are done more in detail, so don't ask me more questions on karma now, otherwise we'll go off into the realm of karma. We're going to try and stick to this topic, but as I've always said, no question should be left ignored. Keep them written and do keep sending. Wherever I find them relevance, I'll bring them up and I'll answer anyway, whichever way. So, prarabdha karma is going to be deciding factor when this individual thinks his body is now no longer suitable for its association to be continued. It can be for growth, it can be for experiences, it can be for knowledge, but there is a certain prarabdha karma which one has to undergo, non-negotiable. It's a prarabdha karma which is not going to be touched by anything at all except exhaustion through your experience of it. Whether it is good experience or a bad experience doesn't matter. But it's only the experience part of it which will exhaust it. Therefore, it depends on the factors of prarabdha, which is very, very, again, abstract. So, how long the idea of Shadavikar is to recognize the dharma of the sharira. कि शरीर के ये षड विकार है. Whether a person is skipped one or not, the fact is the body is undergoing a general principle. The body undergoes in general principles. सामान्य धर्म उसका शरीर का यही है, षड विकार. कभी कभी एक विशेष कैटेगरी है, विशेष applicability है. That is individual karma itself based. So that kind of takes care of sudden deaths or sudden premature deaths, etc., etc. Because otherwise everybody very safely would have old age and die. You won't have the uncertainty of life, which we live with today. Like we say, हमें तो पता ही नहीं कल है भी कि नहीं है. Because that uncertainty factor means how long is this individual thinking this body is still useful for them. It can be decided very early, it can be decided very late, and there are a lot of factors for it. So I'll stop it over there because the topic here is what now that we have started is what are the Pancha Jnana Indriyas? Okay, so far? Okay. Now Pancha Jnana Indriyas we saw is your ear, skin, eyes, tongue, and nose, giving you the 5 perceptions, and they are called Jnana Indriya. Jnana Indriya part of it is in the Sukshma Sharir. The organ part of it is in the Sthula Sharir. So the Golaka of the Indriya is Sharir के साथ है, शरीर का अंग है, शरीर का भाग है. It is a part of Sharir. But when you use the word sense organ, the sense part of it is in the Sukshma Sharir. These being 5, what are their functions? I have changed the order of the text a bit for the sake of explanation. What are the functions of these organs of perception? Shrotrasya Vishayaha Shabda Grahanam. What is the function of the ear? The function of the ear is to grasp, Grahanam. Grahanam means lena. Grasp the word. Means hearing. Hearing is your perception. Ear ka vishay, organ, object of the ear. Sound is the object of the ear. त्वचो विषयः स्पर्श ग्रहणम. Skin का विषय क्या है? What does skin get the knowledge of? Sparsha, touch. Grahanam. You know what Grahanam word is? Take it in. This is the body language for Grahanam. Lena. So, कान का ग्रहणम क्या है? शब्द. कान स्पर्श को ग्रहण नहीं कर सकता. त्वचा शब्द को ग्रहण नहीं कर सकती. चक्षु विषयः रूप ग्रहणम, grasping the form, and form actually indicates the color, because twacha can also give some knowledge of form, but color, which is also inseparable from the form, is very unique only to your chakshu. So chakshu gives knowledge of form and color. Rasanaya vishayaha rasagrahanam. Tongue. Tongue gives the vishaya is taste. Rasana. What is that drink, rasana? I don't know if it's still there. Rasana. This is where the word comes from. Because ras wala hai. It's an object of your tongue. It's a perception of your tongue. Granasya vishaya gandha grahanam. Nose ka vishaya is gandh, smell. Now, all five indriya, now you have to come to the indriya. गोलक का विषय नहीं है ये. इंद्रिया का विषय है शब्द, स्पर्श, रूप, रस, गंध. Simultaneously of ear, skin, eyes, nose, tongue, nose. This is the object. So for any perception to complete itself, the indriya has to be active, gets activated. It gets triggered. When I see a form, my chakshu indriya gets lit, illumined. Because of chakshu indriya, I see the form. This is a theory of perception. Which comes first? Is the object triggering it, or is the indriya triggering the knowledge of the object? It's simultaneous. Indriya hai to hame gyan hai precedes the indriya. If you don't have indriya and you have the object, there is no way you can have knowledge of it. So indriya has to be there. The jnana indriyas have to be there for you to have knowledge, and these five together constitute the world for the humans. Every vishay of the jagat ka har vishay, every knowledge of the world will fall into these five categories. Your entire knowledge is based on this. Your entire categorization of knowledge fundamentally boils down to these five perceptions. To know any object, you touch it, you smell it, you taste it, etc., etc., etc. And then you determine which class it falls into, which species it falls into, it's animate, it's inanimate, and then you have more layers of causation working on it. So you start building up knowledge, but they all fall into these 5. So far, so good on Jnanendriya. Now the author between these two had inserted Devatas of each Indriya. But I have shifted the portion of Devata after the Vishaya because for any perception to take place, implication is, the idea is, अगर मेरा इंद्रिय की capacity है to see, there is a Shakti. Indriya Shakti hai. It's a power, it's a capacity, it's a faculty. The Shakti that is there in the Indriya, which makes the perception possible. That Shakti of all individual based capacities, when it's made in totality, that this capacity make it all total, universal. If my eyes see, your eyes also see. If seeing is possible here, seeing is possible there. जो इस इंद्रिय को शक्ति दे रहा है, जहां से इस इंद्रिय की शक्ति आ रही है, जो इसको lit करता है, that's why I use the word lit, as if it gets lit. The cognition happens. The cognition is lit. जो शक्ति यहां कर रही है, you expand it in totality. It is the same Shakti in totality. For example, for me, for my Indriya to work for me to see, what do you think is the most important ingredient in between? What will enable me to see? First factor. Provided I have my eyes and I'm awake. I'm not sleeping. What do I need to see?
Form,
Form, okay. Correct.
color,
Color. Very good. What do I need to see? What I
prakash,
need? Prakash. Excellent. Excellent. You need prakash. You need light. Now, supposing it's a pitch dark room, absolute pitch dark. In fact, pitch dark is also a relative word. But imagine the pitch dark, correct, absolute dark, a room full of objects. It's got tables and chairs and a lot of things around, and it's got very precious antique pieces on the table. There are vases, antique vases and crockery and glass pieces and decoration pieces on the glass, on the wall. But it's pitch dark and you have just entered that. Is the Indriya lit to see? Will you say, I can see? Will you see?
no,
You can't see. If it's pitch dark, as I said, afterwards eyes get active. So there's some light always. It's a relative term. But imagine it's pitch dark. You don't see. That means, what is that capacity, Shakti of the Indriya, without which the Indriya will be incapable of exhibiting its function, is prakash, is light. What is the source of light in totality?
sun,
Therefore, sun becomes the Devata. The universal principle based on which the Indriya functions, without which the Indriya is incapable of exhibiting its Shakti, अगर लाइट नहीं है, करेक्ट, अगर लाइट नहीं है तो इंद्रिय होना, ऑब्जेक्ट्स का होना doesn't make a difference because my perception still doesn't form. So what is true over here at an individual level, what is happening at the individual level is actually separable from what is happening at the total level, universal level. Individual is called microcosm. The total universal is the macrocosm. It's the principle. So Devata, Deva word itself, the root is Div. Div means bright, shine, which shines. Means that is because of which the Indriya shines. And its universal principle, multiply it. If I get the Shakti in my Indriya to see, light here has to be the principle which helps me to see. I expand this principle. It's a universal principle. I don't have to expand it. I have to recognize it's already there. Expansive enough, universally enough. The minute I recognize its expansive nature, it is the same Shakti which enables everyone to see. It is the same light source which enables everyone to see. That Shakti, total, complete expression of, in this example, light, is now sun, the first perceivable element for us, first source of light for us that we cognize. That is called Devata. Therefore, I'm taking a detour a little bit because I know there'll be some questions in your minds. Therefore, supposing there is some weakness in the Indriyas, किसी की आंख ठीक नहीं चल रही है या जब कमजोर होती है, and you are asked to worship Surya Devata. You do Aditya Hridayam. You do every day Surya Namaskar if it's yoga. And Surya Namaskar is not a posture. Now, very interesting if you visualize this. Keep stretching yourself with the knowledge. Devata is also subtle. दिख नहीं रहा है हमको, but principle तो दिख रहा है. Can I deny that if there is no light, I cannot see? No, light is a perceptible principle, perceivable principle. I recognize light. But Devata, I can't recognize. Because I identify Devata word or Devi word. I identify it to be the form. Whenever the principle is invoked, supposing I have to, if my Indriya is weak, it's like saying there is a source of water from, say, municipality sends us water, and then it comes to our complex and वहाँ पे वो होता है कोई कुछ tap or whatever you call it, and then it comes to individual homes, and many times it so happens that one of the homes needs to shut off their water. Now, if you shut off the main supply, what will happen to everyone? Nobody gets the water. But everybody else needs the water. But this individual doesn't need the water. He's shut off his supply. Now, when he shuts off his supply and he wants to restart his water supply, what does he have to do? Does he need another source of water?
Just needs to connect to the main.
That's it. He just has to again connect to the main. This is the principle behind Devatas and Vedic vision, and a very important principle. Very, very important principle. That whenever individual requirement is there for anything extra. Jeev, when you go move ahead, why is moksha becoming so necessary? Is because Jeev has states of helplessness in his life. बहुत सारी चीजें ना उसकी समझ में है ना उसके काबू में है. He needs the help of some higher associated form of being, which cannot be just based on vagueness. So what Vaidika principle does is very beautifully. For me, just the recognition is oblation. I have so much, I can't express it beyond this, because the minute I recognize this, the words disappear. The Vaidika vision allows individuals to tap into the universal source through their karma and upasana. So if you need your senses to invigorate themselves, or you need some particular, there are worships for those respective devatas. Why now do you need these respective devatas? I've only taken one example. We are still going to do the text. Because each sense indriya is one faculty in itself. It cannot replace the other one. तो चक्षु का देवता चक्षु का ही देवता हो सकता है. रसना का देवता रसना का ही देवता हो सकता है. क्योंकि वो it's not a multidisciplinary, there are different departments headed by one minister, headed by one prime minister. So all these are ministers in that sense. Each one has their own respective portfolio. Now when I have to worship in the sense of that principle of light is nirgunam, identifiable, but it has no expression of form. But for me to contact something which is formless is not possible. So we give it a form associated particularly with that form, and that form helps us to connect to the principle, and that becomes then worship. Devta ki worship. This is the Vaidika principle. There are a lot of offshoots, but this is the fundamental principle. Now, author here says each indriya has their respective devata. Shrotrasya. You are sleeping and not totally gehri neend, but you are fast asleep and you suddenly hear a sound. When you wake up with the sound, what is your first thought? आवाज वहां से आई थी. Isn't it? You will always say it came from that direction. You don't have, if sounds were coming from all directions, what would it be? When sounds come from all directions, which is when you go to discotheques. What happens to sound? It's coming from all directions. It kind of overwhelms your mind because it's chaotic. Direction is the devata of sound. Ear, now go step by step. Physical body में जो हम खींच रहे हैं, जब हम गलती करते हैं और हम खींचे जाते हैं, कान क्यों खींचते हैं जब हम कोई गलती करते हैं? You got it in your school? Have you ever had your, it's annoying. Have you ever had your ears pulled by your teachers? No, why? Because तुमने सुना नहीं था हमने क्या कहा था? तो सुना नहीं तुमने हमने क्या कहा? Did you not hear well? Or when you reach a little older and you start doing this, when your indriya has become weak, what do you do when you have to hear? Have you seen this? You have to do this. means you kind of close this in the direction of the sound for you to hear the sound clearly. The ear may have a defect, Golak may have a defect. The Indriya has taken Shadvikar. In the sense it is, with the age, it is now not as vigorous as it was. Means the Indriya is now not expressing through this Golaka, which is now defective. But you identify that sound can be heard only with the directions. So direction, thick, the Devata of sound. Devata. Cha Vayuhu. Now actually you can all figure it out yourself. For the skin, air is the Devata. Because for you to feel, sometimes we feel the presence of a person before the person is seen. Suddenly. Or the air brings the whiff and you smell, of course, and then all other indriyas are also working. But for the skin, air is the means, the principle with which the indriya operates, because of which the indriya enlivens. Chakshu Surya, we've done that. Varun, water, is for tongue. That is why there are many indicators. If there is a delicious dish, what happens? मुंह में पानी आ गया. मुंह में पानी आ जाता है. In fact, that's a test of the deliciousness of the. And it's not just that the food is only, but rasna, the essential ingredient of the food is not the color, it is not the smell, it is the taste. Though the color and the smell are a part of it, but the taste part comes from the tongue. Therefore, when there is complete dryness of your tongue, you don't get the taste. There are some people who take a sip of water before they actually take the food. Enhances the taste. If you are completely dry mouth, parched mouth, the food doesn't get the same flavor. You don't experience the same flavor. So, what is for the tongue? Devata, Varuna Devata. And what is for the nose? Ashwin Kumars. They're also supposed to be the medical people. Ashwin Kumar, the two nostrils, so two Ashwin Kumars, they're sitting there. They are the Devatas of the Jnana Indriya. Iti Jnana Indriya Devata. In this manner, the entire Jnana Indriya ka prakarnam topic gets completed. How? By first telling us what are the Jnana Indriyas with which you get the knowledge, then telling us what are their respective sense objects, and then telling us what activates them. I think the right word is what activates the Indriya. You have the activating agents sometimes. It's like, say, if you want to make curd out of milk, or you want to make paneer out of milk. When you want to make paneer out of milk, what is the activating agent? You need something acidic to make it, to separate the whey and the cheese from it. Activates it, the correct principle. What activates the Indriya in the subtle body? Are these principles. And therefore, all of them together is said under subtle body. What is true in the Vyashti microcosm is called Vyashti. Vyashti bhav. Vyakti also comes from the same root. What is Vyashti means what is applicable at an individual level is seen in Samashti, in its total form, totality, macrocosm. So if I summarize it, the power exhibited in the individual capacities of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, in terms of Gyanindriyas, tomorrow we may do Karmindriyas, so you will have Karmindriyas, then you will have feelings, thoughts, any capacity, the Shakti. Their totality is referred to as the respective Devata, which kind of illumines that particular capacity, which invigorates the capacity. उसकी शक्ति है वो capacity उसकी inherent नहीं है, is where Vedanta will begin to take you step by step. So where does the Surya get its Shakti from? Is it inherent in Surya? Then Surya is all powerful, is all truth. Surya Devata is all powerful, all truth. Surya also gets its Shakti from somewhere. What is the source of Surya Shakti? And this point is a beautiful story in Kena Upanishad. The exact words may be tomorrow, but an outline of the story I'll tell you. The Devatas, and you hear this in all Puranas and all that, no? Devatas जब असुरों के साथ लड़ाई करते हैं तो फिर suddenly बड़े intoxicated हो जाते हैं. They revel in their own victories, and they get ghamandi and they get arrogant, and then they start feeling they are all powerful because they conquered it all. Anyway, they conquered the human world, because without the Surya Devata I can't see, so तो थोड़ा चढ़ जाती है उनको, as you say in the Laukik Bhasha. So the Devatas get into their own pride. So the Kena Upanishad gives a story at the end. One of those moments where they were all celebrating, all these Devatas like Varuna Devata and Indra Devata, and all these Devatas had come together. Agni Devata. These Devatas are now coming in the organs of action also. So all these Devatas were assembled together celebrating their victory, and they were drinking and dining and whining and completely intoxicated with pride that they're all powerful. They've become victorious. To teach them a lesson that they are not all that victorious, because they are not victorious. When they don't get their Shakti from themselves, it says, the story says, they see a yaksha. A yaksha is like an apparition, somewhere far off. Some sort of an apparition they see while they're celebrating. And they wonder what it is. Because it just doesn't go away. It just slightly kind of moves with a lot of light and brilliance. But it's constant there. So Indra, the lord of all Devatas, tells one of these younger ones, which is Agni Devata and then Varun Devata. Ek karke inko first sends the youngest one in the order and says, "Jaake dekhiya what it is." And so he goes to the Yaksha and he says, "Who are you?" With a lot of pride he asks, "Kaun ho tum?" So Yaksha just doesn't answer anything or says I will have to revise the story. So Yaksha is there silent. Then he says, "Tell me who you are." No answer. He gets very angry. Fire goes first. And he says, "Don't you know who I am?" The Yaksha asks, "Who are you?" "You don't know who I am?" "I'm the fire god, Agni Devata." Yaksha says, "Oh, is it?" Takes out a dry blade of grass. One thin, dry blade of grass. Puts it in front of the fire god, Agni Devata. "You are Agni Devata? Burn it." And he, in his arrogance, I can burn the whole world. Pralaya is one of the aspects of Pralaya is going to be when everything burns. I can burn the whole Srishti. What is this one blade of grass? And he starts to burn it. Nothing happens. It's like हमारे जैसे knobs हैं gas पे, sim and medium and high. So first it was this little power he had put, little some power. A little bit. Is a dry one blade of grass. How much power of his does it need? Little bit. Nothing happened. He increased his power. Nothing happened. Increased his power. Nothing happened. Went to the highest that he could have his power, and the blade of grass did not burn even this much. He goes back absolutely de-energized and completely exhausted, and nothing happened. And Indra says he felt ashamed of himself, fire god, etc. Goes back to all the gods, feeling sorry for himself, and I'm sorry I couldn't find out who this is. So Indra sends the other one. The story is, ek karke, all of them go. And nobody, no water can't wet it. The same blade of grass, water couldn't wet it. The wind couldn't blow it away. Nothing was happening to that thin twig. Kanksha, your mic is on. Akanksha? Okay. The child just took her away. So, everything is still there as was. Now Indra starts suspecting something. Kuch to gadbad hai. Nothing is all my ministers kuch bhi nahi kar paaye karke, so Indra decides to go himself. And when he sees that apparition and that blade of grass, he says nobody's power worked. They're all powerless in the presence of something. So he goes there and humbles himself, bows himself down, prostrates to the apparition, and just says, I request you, reveal yourself. I pray you reveal yourself. Who are you? And sure enough, the apparition, satisfied now that they've all been humbled to their basics, comes to its natural form. And that natural form is the story, because it's from an Upanishad, it has to convey, it is Brahman seen in its form. Brahman comes and says, the story ends to say, gives them all the knowledge to say, you are also powerless. The source of power that even the Devatas get comes from their own Adhishthan, their own base, from where they get the power from, which is the truth, the reality, based on which the entire creation gets its life from, and that is called Brahman. And then the subject completes itself like every Vedanta. Ultimately, the point of Brahman is not to establish its external source. That Brahman, you. So when you go slowly in the Prakriya means the steps, the methodology that Vedanta employs to convey. When you go along the topic, you realize that this individual, all power, all notions, all capacities, all fear, everything bundled up in this individual vision has just two ideas in it. One, that all I have to understand what falls in mithya. Because it's mithya, it's anatma. And the more I'm able to negate it as me, as my identity, as my source, as who I am, the more I'm able to negate it, the more I am in recognition. Because Brahman cannot be described, Atma cannot be described, etc. The more I get closer to the recognition of the source of all, everything. And that is only one. Satyam is Ekam Brahma. So that's the whole idea of all this, one of the ways. And Tomorrow we will see the next part of it, the Panch Karmendriyas, and their same method he'll follow. What are the Karmendriyas? What are their objects? And what are their devatas? And then Panch Jnanendriyas, and then he will talk of Manas and Buddhi. And there was a question asked, because I'm so happy you're all following the classes. So the question was, what happened to Chitta and Ahankar part? Because in one of the previous classes I did mention that the subtle body is made up of Mano, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahankar. So the question was, what happened to Chitta and Ahankar? Where did it disappear suddenly? It has not. It will come. The author is going to talk of it in another category of model. This is based on Sharira. When he will talk of the same model from Gunas, he will talk of Mano, Buddhi, Chit, Ahankar as divisions of subtle body over there. So these are all models, and idea of the model is not just to establish that this model is real than the other model. That's not the idea. The idea is so that you can categorize it into the mithyatvam. Identify on what does it all this depend. It's not just a theory part of it. You identify and place it. It depends on what. So with this, we'll conclude, and you can chant the Shanti mantra.
ॐ सर्वेषां स्वस्तिर्भवतु सर्वेषां शान्तिर्भवतु सर्वेषां पूर्णं भवतु सर्वेषां मङ्गलं भवतु सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ स्वस्ति प्रजाभ्यः परिपालयन्ताम् न्यायेन मार्गेण मही गोब्राह्मणेभ्यः शुभमस्तु नित्यम् लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु काले वर्षतु पर्जन्यः पृथिवी सस्यशालिनी देशोऽयं क्षोभरहितः ब्राह्मणाः सन्तु निर्भयाः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Everyone,